Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Don't you understand, George? It's because you were not born.
Film Church.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
It's all right. It's okay. There's something to live for. Jesus told me so.
Hello and welcome to Film Church Radio, the podcast that treats cinema as a religion, man. It's Sunday, I'm Lewis.
And I'm Brandon.
And we are here to talk about movies. Each week, Brandon and I alternate picking a film for us both to watch and discuss. However, as it is the first Sunday of the month, you know what that means?
I do. What does it mean?
It means that we've got a special guest that has chosen a film for us both to watch. And he joins us now all the way from sunny California. It's my friend and new acquaintance to Brandon, but soon to be a friend as well, I'm pretty sure. It's Andy Zike. Hello, Andy. How are you?
Hi, guys. Doing well. I'm really excited to be here.
We are so excited to have you here. Welcome to the show. Do you want to tell us the film that you picked for us to watch?
Yeah, absolutely. So the film I chose is the documentary film American Movie from 1999, directed by Chris Smith. It stars Mark Borchardt and Mike Schank and Bill Borchardt. You probably haven't heard of them. They are real people. They're not actors. But it's about Mark and his journey into creating both his feature film and then also his short horror film.
Awesome. It was one of those films that I knew something about recently. I heard a lot about it due to the passing of Mike Schank, which we'll get onto very soon. And as soon as kind of that happened, I saw a lot of filmmakers start pouring out about how much they loved the film and how it kind of changed their perspective. So I was so pleased that you chose for us to watch it. It was a great pick for this time. And if you want to hear what we're going to be listening to next week, stick around to the end of the episode and you'll be able to hear what I'm going to pick for us to watch. I'm not going to spoil it now, so you've got to stick around and listen to the end. Before we get into the show, though, we'd like to say thank you to everyone who has been listening to the podcast and sending their love for this show. If you're new to the show and enjoying it, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to be notified when a new episode is available. This is a film church, so we post episodes on Sundays. And if you really enjoy the show, please share it with friends. Let the congregation grow. That's what it's all about. You can find us on all social media platforms at Film Church Radio, where you can leave us a comment or send a message about the show. We're getting to that point where we're going to start needing suggestions soon. So if you have any films that you want us to talk about in the future, please send them across to us and we'll add them to the list. We also post extra content on YouTube, and this whole episode will be streamed, not live, but you'll be able to see us as we talk about the movie. So please go ahead and head over to YouTube to see that. We much appreciate it. And if you've got any more comments about the film, anything that you think we've missed at the end of the show, leave it as a comment. Let us know what you think. Like I said, with this being a film church, we'd love to know everyone's thoughts. So please get involved and get in touch. And last but not least, we'd love for you to rate and review the show on whatever podcast service you're streaming from. It helps people find us, join the congregation, and see what we're doing and get involved. That's what it's all about. Before we get into the main feature, we like to take a bit of time to get to know our guest. And the best way to get to know someone is to talk about the movies that they love and the things that shaped their film watching at the moment. So we have got some questions for you, Andy. I hope you're ready for them.
I'm ready.
The first one I want to ask is, what film was it that made you convert to the Church of Film?
It's a tough question. I don't know if I could pick like one singular film, but when I was a kid, I always grew up watching a lot of animated movies. I think as most kids probably do, right? Like the Disney Fair, Lady and the Tramp, Aladdin. I'm not talking like the DComs. I'm talking even older. And obviously those stories are so well done and so well made and so well animated. And there's an element of like magic to them. And I kind of started there, branched out into like other animation as a kid, branched out as if I'm like actively picking what I'm watching at like 7 years old. Watching a lot of other animated films. And as I got a little bit older and got into, my early teenage years, watching a lot of horror films. That's a huge, huge passion of mine, is horror films. And right around like middle school time, early high school was when I thought about making films for a career. Ended up going to film school. Have not become a filmmaker, unfortunately, but I still have that passion. And so it's hard for me to really pinpoint like one particular moment or film, but films and movies have just really been a part of my life even since I was little. So it's kind of been a slow burn for me.
Yeah, and we even met. I mean, I know that we probably should have mentioned this at the top, but we met working at Universal Studios, which isn't the Universal Studios that makes movies. This was the theme parks in Orlando. But we still met at, it's kind of on the side of the movie industry, I guess.
Yeah.
You could ride the movies as opposed to making them. So, it's always been there. I love that.
And I forget how we came to know that we both loved movies, because I think you were at university at the time as well.
Yeah.
And so I forget how it came about, but I just remember one day we got on to talking about movies, and it was like that Spider-Man meme. We were like, wait, you too? Me? You? What?
Yeah.
And then it just kind of took off from there.
It did. Yeah, I can remember talking a lot about Spider-Man in the first, few weeks of getting to know you, because I think, was it Amazing Spider-Man 1 was just about to come out, the new Andrew Garfield?
I think so, one or two. Yeah,
psyched.
that was like early 2010s.
Yeah.
Did y'all ride the Spider-Man ride a lot? Is that at Universal there?
It is,
Orlando?
yeah. It's in the Islands of Adventure. Mm-hmm.
I think we did, actually. I remember us having a day and like on our off day going into the park and riding all the rides. I think we hit that one.
Yeah, we did.
Nice. I finally got to go on that ride. We went to Universal when I was a kid, and I didn't get to go on that ride, but then we went. I went back like 5 years ago, I think, and I made a point to like go on that Spider-Man ride.
Yeah.
It was a blast.
It's a good one. Yeah.
It's a really good one, yeah.
And it's based on like
the Universal Studios out here is not as good as the one in Orlando.
Yeah. Well, I have another question for you. So if you were, I mean, this is kind of similar to what we're doing today. Basically, if you were a guest preacher at a church, what film would you choose to show on a Sunday? As opposed to today, I guess, because like today it's more catered towards Lewis and I, but like if, you had a bigger audience.
This was also difficult. All these questions were very difficult. And I think that just speaks to how much I like films and like talking about films and watching films.
I mean, to be fair, I don't know what I would answer to any of these questions.
I thought a lot about it. And I narrowed it down to two, kind of like depending on which way I would go. My all-time favorite movie is Back to the Future.
Nice.
I know it's like a little bit of like a dark horse pick for somebody's favorite movie, but I love that movie so much. And if somebody hasn't seen it, that would be the first thing I would show them, just because I'm so passionate about it. But if I'm talking in terms of just what I think is the best film ever made, that I think everybody should see at one point in their life, it would be The Godfather. I think that film is just start to finish in terms of the writing, the acting, the way it's directed, just every component of that movie comes together, and I consider it the perfect film.
Yeah. I'm kind of right in line with you as far as The Godfather goes. It's like a perfect film.
Have you seen the TV show about how they made it? It's called The Offer.
I don't. Oh no, it's a recent show, right?
It is. Yeah, it came out this year. I've been watching a little bit of it. It's really interesting. It's all like a dramatic take. It's like scripted and whatnot, but it's really entertaining and really funny too.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I've been wanting to check it out. I think they're making a movie too, like separate from The Offer. They're making a movie, and I think Oscar Isaac is supposed to play Francis Ford Coppola. I read that like a year. I don't know if that's still in development or not, but excited to see what happens with that. And Coppola is working on his final film right now, Megalopolis.
Has he said that it's going to be his final film?
He hasn't said, but I mean, he hasn't made one in a long time, and he's putting his own money into this, and I
He's
mean,
getting up there. He's what,
yeah.
80s something?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And earlier this year, I read the book Easy Riders and Raging Bulls, or the other way around. I can't really remember. And that goes into like detail about, him making The Godfather and the amount of drugs that were being passed around. So that's a really good read, though, if you want to know like the kind of unbiased story behind it. It's really interesting.
sweet.
Andy, so if film heaven exists, what do you think it looks like?
I would think film heaven to me would just be having access to any film that you'd want to watch, whether it's a streaming film, a movie theater to watch that film, a video store you can go into, like just having access to any film that's out there and the availability of it, and then also the time to sit down and actually watch what you want to watch. I think that's a big component for me. There's so much out there that I wish I could watch, and I simply don't have the time for it. So to me, it would just be accessibility of any film, any show, anything that you're interested in watching, and the time to sit down. And maybe you have some friends there, whether they're your own personal friends like us, where we're just chatting about films. Maybe it's Francis Ford Coppola, and you can watch, The Godfather with you, something like that. To me, that is what film heaven would look like.
That's awesome.
Sounds amazing.
So it would just be like a cinema next to like a house with a couch, next to like a video rental store, and you would just be like,
Exactly.
today
All
I'm
just
going to
in
go
walking distance.
there. Yeah.
Depending on your vibe for that day.
Yeah.
So if you were officiating a wedding and there's like a film that summarizes love, or maybe not even love, but something that you feel that someone who you're marrying needs to watch, what would that be?
I picked something that's a little bit out of the box for this. I imagine most people probably pick like a rom-com, right, or a romance film. I picked I Love You, Man.
Nice.
And to me, it's a movie. It is a wedding movie. There's a wedding in it, so I can justify it that way. And I think it's mostly obviously about a guy who wants to find a friend and form like a loving relationship in that sense. But there is also that element of like two people finding true love and getting married in it as well. But to me, it's just obviously it's a very funny movie and a quotable movie, and an enjoyable watch. But it's a film that brings a lot of people together in different ways, whether it's a family, a friend, a romantic partner. I think it's just a lighthearted, entertaining, happy ending type of a movie.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've seen that one. Is Paul Rudd in that?
Yeah, it's okay. Paul Rudd and Jason Segel.
Yeah, that's right. Cool. Yeah, I remember liking it a lot.
Yeah, it's right at the height of like Jason Segel's kind of comedy film career.
Yeah.
Just was it around the time of the Muppets as well?
Slightly before, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it kind of like in that, like, I don't want to call it his prime years because I think he still makes good movies.
Interesting stuff, yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, that like there's a lot of buzz for Jason Segel around that time and Paul Rudd too, like pre Ant-Man.
Yeah. I think The Muppets is an underrated modern classic.
I love The Muppets.
Me
I
too.
haven't seen that one.
The songs are great. The idea
cameos.
for it's wonderful. Yeah, the cameos are spot on. It's perfect. I love it. It's you should go and watch it, Brandon. It's really good.
Sweet.
Maybe I'll pick it for next
Maybe that's
week.
what we're watching next week.
Yeah. Talking of Kermit the Frog, Andy, who are your film gods?
Is Kermit one of your film gods? Is that the
I mean, he is after the Muppets.
This is also a difficult question. I think I always was like really attracted to the films of Tim Burton. Burton is like just somebody who has style down pat. A Tim Burton film when you see it. I've always enjoyed his movies. I really I mentioned horror movies before. I love horror movies. So people like John Carpenter, Tobe Hooper, those are people that I've just exhausted their filmographies and gone through everything. And then probably on the other side of the camera, Jimmy Stewart. I know, Lewis, I think you and I have spoken about Jimmy Stewart, but just love Jimmy Stewart. Just like to keep in with the religion metaphor, just like what a saint of cinema, right? Just a great actor. Robin Williams too is just a joy to watch in anything he does. And I love Natalie Portman. I have to give up to Natalie Portman.
Yeah. Natalie Portman's career is so interesting to me.
It
I feel
really
like
is.
every choice she makes, I'm just like, where did this come from?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, and then coming back to like Thor as well was such a bold step. You know, it's she never kind of, I don't know, takes it easy. Or
And I can
I feel like-
appreciate when an actor or an actress or whoever really can make fun of themselves and like what they appear to be to the general public. Because I always think back to the skit she did for SNL, where she's like, "I'm not a role model," and she's like cursing and flicking off the camera and like throwing stuff out the window. It's so funny. It's so funny. And she's just rapping. It's really funny.
I love
I
the
think-
interview she did with Zach Galifianakis in between two ferns.
yeah.
He's like, "So you shaved your head for V for Vendetta. Did you also shave your V for vagina?" It just gets me.
Yeah. Those are really great.
Those are really funny.
So I know you talked about like being into horror and stuff, and while we're on this Film Gods, you do a thing every October that's got quite a following. It's you do like 31 days of horror.
Yeah.
Where you kind of write out what you're going to watch each night. And people love it. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. I am always surprised when I realize that it actually does have a following, and it's nothing major, but every year like you say, I write out just a list of horror movies that I want to watch, and some of them are new, some like new as in like they came out that calendar year. Some of them are just things I've never seen before. Some of them are just classic favorites that I want to rewatch that I haven't watched in a while. And when I was younger, I would put it on a notebook page. I would take a picture of the notebook page and like put that on Facebook and whatever. And I was like, this is silly. Who wants to see a pic? No one's going to go through Instagram and like this picture of a notebook page with text on it. Like, well, that's not what this is for. But every year that I don't post that picture, people are in my DMs. Where is our notebook picture? What is going on? Where's the list? I'm like, I guess people actually care about this.
That's cool.
But yeah, I picked 31 different movies. I always end it with watching Halloween on Halloween because that's one of my all-time favorite movies, let alone horror movies. And it was fun. This year was a good year for horror movies. A lot of really good stuff. Smile, Barbarian, Pearl, and X were great. I know, Lewis, you and I chatted a little bit about that. Really, really good year for horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it helps me narrow it down. When I see that list go up, I always kind of have a look through and think, okay, what is Andy watching? What can I kind of pick out of here to watch as well?
So you always post that on Twitter?
Well, Twitter's like a weird place right now, so it'll probably live on Instagram for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your Instagram for the listeners?
I am at AJ Zike, Zike.
Sweet. I just have one final question. So the real film church to Lewis and I is like the cinema. Do you have something like an experience that you had going to a cinema, whether it be the first time this happened or a recent time? It could be, any time. I feel like for cinema lovers, we have a lot of experiences where we go to a cinema and it is a religious experience. Do you have any experiences like that you want to talk about?
Yeah. Maybe like, I don't know, let's see, 5 years or so ago, I went to see La La Land in theaters, and everybody was telling me when La La Land came out, you're probably not going to like this movie. It's a musical. It's a little bit romantic. Like, it doesn't really seem like your cup of tea. But I love both of those actors. Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone are great. And I was interested in it by the look of like the trailer and everything like that. And so I decided to go see it. Obviously, it was getting like rave reviews. It was going to be an Oscar worthy movie. And I like to check those out just on my own anyway. So I went to see it. This was at a time where I like wasn't super happy with the job I was doing professionally. Wasn't super happy with where I was at, because living in Los Angeles for the first time can be like a little bit hectic. But watching that movie, loved the movie. But to me, that's like a 10 out of 10 film, just across the board. Really just like reinvigorated my love for Los Angeles and where I am. And I remember walking out of the theater. I went to an independent theater chain here in Los Angeles. It's called Lemley. It's named after the guy. I think he was Carl Lemley for Universal.
Mhm.
Lewis would probably know more
Yeah, that's
history on
right.
that. I was walking out in this like kind of like a downtowny kind of local suburb area. And it just like I don't know. I felt like a different person coming out of that. I had a different
Yeah.
appreciation for the city, and there was lights around me, and people, and sounds, and smells, and I was like really a transformative experience. And I don't know if I've had anything quite like that up to that point, and I don't know if I've had it since. But obviously, it had an effect on me. I'm still living in LA now, 5 years later, working a different job, doing very different things. But I didn't expect that type of movie to hit me that way, and just enjoyed it as a film, and then just also as just a life experience.
Yeah,
That's
that's awesome.
great.
Yeah, La La Land is a very it's a bold statement. It's a bold cinematic statement of a movie, and it is it's a lot of fun. Like I remember I was working at Studio Movie Grill when that came out, so I got to kind of experience it, kind of the same experience you had the first time watching it, but then also getting to like re-experience it with like new audiences coming in, and getting to kind of be a part of different audiences coming in and out of that movie. Yeah, such a good movie. Excited for Damien Chazelle's new film.
I know, it's
about
going to
a
be
month.
good. Yeah. I've heard it's about 3 hours long as well. So there's going to be a lot of debauchery in it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
La La Land is so great to me because I just feel, that everything comes in cycles in cinema. Everything is, like the Western and everything like that. And they've all had revivals apart from the musical. There's not been that many revivals of the musical. And it was such a bold choice to go after such a success of Whiplash to go, I'm just going to make, an old classic Hollywood musical.
Yeah.
And it just works so well. And it's so singular that I think, and I know that it does get a bit of, not hate, but there's a few people that like poo-poo it. But I think it's great. I think it's a modern classic. I love it.
I think people do the poo-poo thing though, just because it was so popular. And I think sometimes people like to do the trendy thing where you don't like what everybody else likes. And then plus the whole fiasco at the award ceremony where it won and it didn't win. So I think it's like a little bit of easy bait in that sense. But yeah, talk about a person who just wants to make whatever movie he wants, right? And Damien Chazelle, and like, so I want to make a musical. I'm gonna make a musical. I feel like it ties into our theme a little bit today.
Definitely, and I feel like he's such a filmmaker for lovers of cinema. Like Whiplash was great as a little drama, and then the history in La La Land, and now it's like the silent era coming into the talkies in Hollywood. For anyone that's interested in cinema and like the history of it, he's making films for us. So I love the guy. I can't wait to see it. Well, now I think we are going to move on to our feature presentation. This is American Movie from 1999.
It takes a village to make a movie, but when that village is Menomonee Falls, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, Wisconsin, the results are bizarre, comical, and quintessentially American. With the help of his mother, his 82-year-old uncle, and a local cast of oddballs, DIY filmmaker Mark Borchardt fights his way through internal and external roadblocks to achieve his goal of making his movie, an independent horror short film called Coven. I have to pronounce that correctly because he's very particular about that. Making his movie his way. His inspiration comes from films as disparate as The Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Seventh Seal, as well as his experiences growing up amid the gray skies, rusty cars, and ranch houses of Milwaukee's northwest side. Spanning over 2 years of struggle, financial decline, and spiritual crisis, this cult favorite, which was a winner of Sundance's Grand Jury Prize for documentary, is a hilarious, poignant, and heartfelt tale of ambition, obsession, excess, and one man's pursuit of the American dream.
Awesome. Now, I always like to start, when we start to talk about a film, I always like to start with either where we heard about it first or where we saw it first. And Andy, as this was your pick for this week, when did you first see this film?
I probably watched this for the first time, I want to say I was in high school, maybe around like 2008, 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. And it was in my period of time where I was like, I had decided that I wanted to do film as a career, or at least attempt to do film as a career and go to college for it and whatnot. So what I was doing was just doing a lot of research online in terms of what people were generally considering very good movies to watch, etc. And I remember it showed up on a bunch of different lists because it's a very unique movie. It's not something that is what you would normally expect or what you'd find in a textbook. This is no Citizen Kane. But it was something that I was like, oh, this seems interesting and it seems fun. And I remember watching it and just loved it right off the bat.
That's awesome. And Brandon, had you heard about it before?
Yeah, I first heard about this film about 10 years ago. I was just coming off of a night or a day of like filming and doing stuff around Austin with a film buddy of mine. And we were staying the night at a friend's house. So it was like midnight and I'm exhausted and we sit on the couch and the person we were staying with was talking about this movie. He's like, we should watch this. You guys will like it. He puts it on and I fall right to sleep. So it's like been on my mind since then. Like, because the next day they were like, oh, this movie was really good. And they were talking about it. And like, I didn't remember a single thing about it. So it's been on my mind since then. And then our mutual friend, Zach, who's been on the show, this is like one of his favorite movies. And about a year ago, he let me borrow it. And it's sort of a similar thing happened, but a little bit differently. I think I had gotten off work and I like started drinking some beers and I put this movie on and I was not ready for it. I kind of started having an existential crisis while I was watching it, being like, oh my God, this movie is about me. I got to turn it off. And so I've sort of been afraid to go back and watch it, but like I should have known that it was going to be amazing, and that it was going to be great. And I just needed to sit through it, but I think I probably wasn't ready for it at the time. So yeah, that was my experience up until now with this movie.
I did think about you a lot while I was watching it. I was like, I'm sure Brandon is getting a lot from this movie. I hadn't heard about it until Mike Schank passed away earlier this year. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people kind of were tweeting about it and sending kind of just think pieces out about the documentary itself. And Edgar Wright wrote a really great, just a tweet just about how he'd watched it when he was, just starting out, and it kind of gave him so much drive and how everyone was so real. And it was just like, I could get my friends together and I could actually do something. Yeah. And it, and then it kind of added into my to watch list then. But it's not easy to get a hold of. I mean, it's on Criterion Channel right now. I know it's on DVD and stuff, but it's not like widely available. Mm-hmm. It's not kind of on a lot of streaming sites. Yeah. So yeah, I'm really happy that we got around to watching it. So it does tell the story of Mark over, as Andy said, a 2-year period where he's trying to. I mean, he starts off trying to get another film off the ground. It's kind of, we see the starting process of his feature film. Yeah. And then he goes back to Coven, which may sound weird as to why we're saying it like that. It's actually Coven, but he is adamant to call it Coven. So it's just referred to as Coven the whole way through, which is bizarre. But it's a really interesting story about just the drive to get a film made. I mean, it's insane. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, just right off the bat, I think Mark, well, all of the characters kind of stand out a lot, but I mean, it starts out with Mark and him. I mean, the opening like dialogue of the film, he's talking about how he's failed, that he was a failure and he can't be a failure anymore, else he's going to get sad and depressed, and he's got to no matter what, he's got to like follow through and complete his dream. And I think that his attitude right off the bat is just infectious. And then you get into some of the other characters that he's surrounded himself with that have been infected by his drive and want to help him complete his project. And then kind of quickly after that, maybe like 10 or 20 minutes in, you see the other side of that and the people who don't believe in him at all, you know?
Yeah.
It's funny because I think, oh, go ahead, Lewis, sorry.
I was just going to say, and it's sadly mostly family that don't see anything, you know, of note. Even his mother, who does help him towards the end, is like, yeah, I don't think he's going to make it. Yeah. Which is really sad.
Mm-hmm. And there's like a weird like dichotomy for people that do support him, and there's like an element of resentment that they are supporting him, or they don't want to like publicly make it appear like there's like, you look at, you know, I know we'll talk a little bit about the different people in the film, but you look at like his Uncle Bill, who is putting up a lot of money, and I think that says a lot about somebody to, you know, in terms of supporting a family member in their endeavors and what they're trying to do. Especially with the amount of, I think there's like a quote where Bill put in like, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars into Northwestern, the feature film. Mm-hmm. And he's always cracking jokes at Mark and acting like he doesn't want to be doing whatever it is they're doing. Yeah. That he doesn't understand how the bank works. Like very typical, like old grandpa stuff. Yeah. But yet he still supports him. And I know at the end of the film, maybe we won't talk about that until later, but there's a nice moment at the very end of the film where that support still goes on. And so there's this weird like dichotomy between those two ideas of support, but also not supporting him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 I mean, it kind of goes to show the determination that you have to have, and especially Mark has to have in his situation to complete anything and to get anything, to get a film done. He's already like on top of battling his own inner demons of having the drive to get something made. He's also battling other people and having to convince other people, which, you know, I think can kind of be a good thing. I mean, it's like if he didn't have to, like if Bill had just given him the money, you know, just wrote him a check or whatever, and he didn't have to be accountable and like keep track of the books side of the project, I don't think that would have done him a service. You know, I think it might have hindered what he was able to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think Uncle Bill probably knew that in terms of not making him, you know, keep track of it, but keeping him, I don't know, humble and like, yeah, you know,
like if you're gonna do this, you've really got to want to.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
and you've got to want to have the reward as well.
Yeah. And they talk about, there's a scene where it's, I forget how old he turned, but Bill has a birthday in the film, and they're at a diner or something, and it's all the family. And Mark's father is saying that Bill used to be a scholar and he was very smart, and, you know, he has an answer to every question. And so I feel like you see a little bit in that with what you were just describing, Lewis, is like, sure, he puts up the money, but then he doesn't just disappear. Even if he appears to not know what's going on with the money or appears frustrated with the process, like, I think his drive as I hesitate to call them characters because they're all real people, but as a person in this film, to keep Mark on track there's like an element of him being very smart about this and being very business savvy and a scholar. And I think that kind of shows through a little bit, even if it's not totally portrayed or if he's not portrayed in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Bill kind of is the perfect antagonist for Mark. When I called Zach the other day to talk to him about this movie after I'd just finished it, and one of the things he said was like, you could not write more unique characters. And
it's true.
And it's interesting, the dynamic between Mark and Bill, because Mark is, he's so determined. He's like Mr. Positive. Like every every situation he like, finds some good in it. In the challenges that he faces. But Bill is the only one who kind of like gets under his skin, and you can see it. You can see it on his face, even though Mark still overcomes it, he still kind of turns it around and kind of pushes through those situations. You can tell that he's like really deterring him,
Yeah. Well, it's like the scene where
it's in a great family way too, because there's that scene where he gives him a bath. I think it's on Thanksgiving or during the Super Bowl or something. So I don't know. It just makes me think of like sibling rivalries or any sort of familial conflict where people can say things and then you still push through it because your family, and even if somebody says something negative or there's a critique, it's usually done with an element of support behind it or to make you better in a different way. And so what you were touching on Brandon, like he pushes through and then it's still his uncle at the end of the day, and he still loves his uncle and appreciative of everything and appreciative of like the wisdom and the money and the support and everything. It's such an interesting relationship.
Yeah, it is. That is a really nice scene too that you're talking about when he gives him a bath, because you do see, even though it seems like he's an antagonist through the whole thing, you do see this kind of bonding and special relationship that they have. I love like when he's talking about his toe. He's like that toe's a science photo, and Bill just repeats everything he says. He's like, science photo? He's like, yeah, like for science class. Science class? And then even later when like after Thanksgiving when he's like really drunk and he's like, I see great cinema in this, and he's like, cinnamon? Just
like
like
a very typical old person.
Yeah.
I think that's the sign of this being a great documentary, though, because it comes at a point in the film where you're not quite sure what that relationship is, and what we've seen of Bill hasn't been 100% there yet. He hasn't kind of, Mark hasn't been. I don't know. It's the relationship has been weird up until this point.
Yeah.
We know that he's lent Mark a lot of money, and Mark keeps talking about you're gonna get it back. You're gonna get it back. But until that point, we see that the relationship goes both ways. That there's a lot that Mark probably does for Bill that we don't get to see, and this is him kind of, paying.
There's an element of respect there for respect for an elder or for a family member.
Yeah.
I do love that scene. That whole Thanksgiving day, it's just brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because early on, like. Just the car ride, he's just like the car ride in the beginning. He's just like, I don't believe in anything.
Yeah.
He's got faith in nothing, I think he says at one point, and then he's like, I don't believe in anything of what you're doing. And but Mark is like, he's just still like trying to turn it around. And there's also a great moment when he's like, you're gonna get your name in the credits as a producer, and he's like, yay.
He has like a weird, almost like a power over Mark to a certain degree, because like the classic scene where he's filming him recording that opening line to and you don't see every single take, but Mike is in the background, and Mike is like, okay, now we're on to take 64. And it's like, they've done this 64 times. It's the dead of winter. This poor old man is just sitting out in the car. And then at the end of it, he's just like, no, I'm done. We're done with this. And Mark's like, okay, sure, we're done.
I think that shows a lot to Mark's like positivity, as you were saying, Brandon. The fact that Bill's the one that caves first. It's not Mark getting frustrated that he can't say 9 words.
Yeah.
Back to back, it's Bill that's getting frustrated that it's not good enough.
Yeah. And Mark still made it work. Like, you get to see that part. You get to see how he edited it at the end.
I wish we could have seen them filming when the car is like moving and he leans out the window, because we only see him record the audio of the line. And there has to be a story there. How everything else is played out.
Yeah.
The one bit I am really glad that they showed us them filming is them throwing that poor guy's head through the cabinet door that they didn't do enough to break. I mean, talk about running through brick walls for people. This poor guy, before we even see it, he says to the camera, "I've been dreading today. Like, I know what's coming. I've been dreading it so much." And they're like, messing with the door, trying to make it break. And then they shove his head into it, and it just does not budge at all.
Yeah, well,
and then Mark is so casual. He's like, "Oh man, I'm sorry. I tried to put your head through that."
Okay, so I was listening to the commentary earlier, and it shows Mark like punch it a couple of times, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I tried to put your head in through this." In the commentary, they said they cut out Mark actually punches that thing like 20 times. They only show him punch it a couple of times. He punches it 20 times, and he still can't punch through it.
Oh my god!
But yeah, that guy was like talking about how he they had like filmed it a year before, and he was like, I was hoping that it was good the first time, but we got to do it again.
I think that the actors in the movie, like the actors in the movie within the movie, are so interesting too, because they've stuck with Mark for 2 years trying to make, and I don't know, I'm assuming he's paying them or at least giving them credit or something. Who knows what that's all about, but the fact that they still stuck around and kept coming back and kept wanting to be a part of it, or even his friends who were holding the camera for him or doing the storyboards, or they interview a guy who was going to do special effects at one point. So like he really took it seriously and filled all these roles, whether the people were like truly trained or qualified or what, but they stuck with him and they came back. Even the guy that was like, I'm dreading this scene, he's there and he's ready to do it, and he probably gets concussed in the process.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets people on side, I mean, when he's setting up his feature film, Northwestern, I mean, I don't know if it's just a producer or if it's, a scout or who it is, but is it Joan, the girl that he starts
His
dating?
girlfriend.
Like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're dating now.
Yeah.
And it's like, he's obviously got a pull over people to make them kind of keep coming back, which I think, you see in the film. You can see that pull because he's so enthusiastic. He knows what he's trying to do. He's not going to let it drop, and he has got that. He is funny. There's certain things that are really, really funny, especially between him and Mike.
Yeah. And he's likable. He's he's had so many personal problems. He's very poor and he's past due. Like there's that great scene where he's going through all his bills and he's like, "Oh, I got a MasterCard. F yeah." And, like just celebrate. Like he's just a likable guy despite his borderline alcoholism or his being in debt or any of the issues that might really push somebody down in life. He perseveres, and I think that's what makes him so likable, is that you want to root for him.
Yeah. I have a question for both of y'all in relation to that. Do you think that Mark's love for cinema is as infectious as any great director? I think I listen to interviews with directors all the time, Scorsese, etc. Like, and when you hear people like that talk about cinema, it just makes you want to go out and make a movie. It makes you want to watch everything out there and create beautiful art. Do you think that do you think that's kind of why this film resonates with people, is because Mark's love for cinema is infectious like that?
I think his drive definitely is. I think you see the lengths that he goes to not only get this film made, but also get it made the way he wants it. There's no, even on the stuff that he does have to compromise on, there's still, he still goes that extra mile to get it as perfect as possible.
Yeah.
In his eyes. And that's definitely infectious. You can see he's given his life to it. You want him to succeed. You want him to make the best film he can.
Yeah.
I would agree too. I would say 1,000% yes, because there's these little moments, they're almost like blink and you miss them moments, where his education about film kind of shines through. He's like standing with Mike and I think they're in front of the junkyard or something, and he's just casually talking about the first time he tried to film Northwestern, and he says something like, we've filmed in every f-stop known to man, and that's not something that the casual person would know about, but the fact that he knows about f-stops, or the fact that he storyboards all of his work, and the storyboards are actually good. They're not just like
Yeah.
stick figures on paper or
Yeah.
anything. Like all these little bits and bobs about the filmmaking process, that's the kind of stuff, like Brandon, like you said, when you listen to a director interview, they're talking about that kind of stuff, the technical side of it and the process. And he's got such a passion that he knows all of that stuff. And so I think there's an interesting element where you can't quite like achieve it and like get to the end result like a lot of the other directors can. But I think that passion is totally there. That's what draws me to the movie, and it's entertaining to me, is to having gone through film school and done the the filmmaking quote unquote thing. That's the relatable elements to me. So
yeah, for sure. And this is at a time when like the filmmaking is looks very different now than it did back then, where he's shooting on film, he's hand editing on film. It's so interesting to watch the process, and fun to watch. Lewis and I were talking about this a little bit earlier. We both saw The Fabelmans this week. Have you seen it yet, Andy?
Not yet.
It's really, really good. I won't spoil it for anybody, but I ended up watching it the same day I watched American Movie, and it was a great double feature for this movie, I would say.
Yeah.
Because you get to see kind of some of the same like filmmaking process and stuff too.
Yeah. It's hard to, around that filmmaking process, it's hard to think of this as coming out in 1999. It feels it feels earlier than that. The whole way through, it does feel a lot, and that's probably the setting and the fact that they're using film and all that kind of stuff. But it does feel like, late 80s as opposed to late 90s.
Yeah.
Because like camcorders, people were starting to record on not quite digital yet, but they were starting to move away from film.
Yeah.
So the fact that everything is still handheld cameras and re-recording sound, is really interesting, and probably speaks a lot to Mark's knowledge, about cinema and filmmaking.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, this is right at the time of the, the indie like 90s surge. This is like 94, 95 when they start recording this documentary. And it took a couple of years to film the documentary and then a couple of years to edit it, I guess. But yeah, it feels like Mark is in line with all of those kind of indie filmmakers of the time.
Yeah. There's a scene too where they reference that he's watching, I think it's is it Billy Crystal hosting the Academy Awards, and Mark's sitting there watching the Academy Awards, and whatever the joke is that he makes in the monologue of like, all these indie filmmakers, nice to meet you all, I don't know who all of you guys are anymore. And it's interesting because that's real life, and that's, like you mentioned, like we can look at that like retroactively and say, oh, there was this huge indie surge, and even American Movie, probably the documentary as on its own is a part of that to a certain extent. So
because it won the Grand Jury Prize of Sundance that year that it came out, which is great. I'm sure it just launched everybody into a lot of opportunities. The Chris Smith, the guy who directed this documentary, was one of the producers on Tiger King. He just directed the Robert Downey Jr. or Robert Downey Sr. documentary about Robert Downey Jr.'s dad, which I haven't watched yet, but it looks really good. I think it's already out on Netflix.
And he directed the documentary about Jim Carrey.
Yes, Jim and Andy. Yeah. Yeah. Which, speaking of which, like while watching this, I couldn't help but think about the filmmaking of the documentary itself. It's just so well done, and he's having to direct people while they're in real life, they're trying to like live their lives and like make a movie and stuff. He's having to like, okay, now I need to get this cut away. I need you to like stand over here and do this. But it doesn't feel like that. Yeah, exactly. It's like
everywhere.
The editing is amazing. Like they had to have had 2 cameras for some of it, but I don't know. Like the editing is just so well done. It's incredibly well made, and feels like it's hard to see how he did it. How he did it so well because mainly because of the editing. But yeah, like you said, it seems like he's everywhere. The camera is just in all the right places.
And it's one of those documentaries that I feel could just go on for double the time, and I'd be happy. There feels like there's a lot that was left out, that I could have done with watching again.
Yeah.
I think a lot of documentaries, depending on the subject matter, can be dry. And I think general viewing public, I'm sure a lot of people, that's their biggest critique with documentaries, is that they're a little bit, dry, or they go on for a little bit too long. But I think this movie is about like an hour, 45 minutes, something around there. But it's such a quick watch. I didn't do the thing where you push the remote and see how far along you are.
Yeah.
Like next thing I know, the movie is almost over. And I'm like, gosh, I could be here for another 20 minutes, another half an hour. Like I want to know what happens next. I didn't want to leave these people, despite all of their craziness and zaniness. Like I wanted to be there more.
Yeah,
definitely. It's it's great. And I think the fact about it is those documentaries that seem dry seem to only have one message, where this touches on so much, not only about being a filmmaker, but also about America and, circumstance and kind of achieving your dreams. It's not just a one.
Well, there's just lots of stuff about life in there, just, like you said, about achieving the American dream, but then you've also got all the great stuff with Mike and talking about his drug use and talking about like just wanting a friend to drink vodka with him. And, and there's a lot of stuff about just wanting like companionship and just wanting to believe in something, and all of these like universal, like human story themes, that are seeped in there, stuff with family and, stuff with, the dynamics between his siblings and his parents, and then between his, ex-wife and his children and his girlfriend, and, just, it's just, there's just so much of life seeped in there. And then Bill, who's this old man who's just, at one point, it's kind of it's kind of an interesting scene when Mark comes in and he's like, "What the hell did you do with your life?" And you're just like, it's such an honest. Everybody in this documentary is so honest and so genuinely themselves, for better or worse. That there's so much to take from it. I think you could take something from this every time you watch it, even if you watch it a million times.
Mike has that great quote, and I do say great quote. It seems a little funny. I don't think it's gonna like stand up in the pantheon of great movie quotes, but where he talks about playing the lottery, and he's like, I always say, when you play the lottery, you can win or you can lose, but if you do drugs or you drink alcohol, you always lose. Yeah. And it's funny at first, and it's so simple and basic, but you're like, there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of people who fall down on their luck, and he was one of those. Mike was one of those people who was an alcoholic and quit doing that. And he tells that insane story where he took acid that was laced with PCP, I think, and almost died. And then goes on to tell Mark, "Oh, by the way, we'll stay up all night. I'll tell you even more of these stories." So you talk about life lessons. They're almost like hidden in plain sight in a way, because they're so simple and they're so straightforward. But I think they hit so well and so strongly.
Yeah, I think Mike is very unassuming, but there is a lot of wisdom in kind of everything that he says, and he's just such a like great personality. I mean he feels just like a national treasure.
Yeah.
He's like the ultimate like sidekick or buddy.
Yeah.
He is. Yeah. Every time he's on screen, I just felt happy. Just seeing, like, whenever he'd show up at the house, I was like, okay, good, Mike's here. You know, he's going to say something that's just going to warm my heart, or he's going to smile, and you know, it was just great. I just loved him so much. And then when he does his scream,
I love that scene where he comes in. I think it's on Thanksgiving, and he's just like being really coy. And Mark's like, "What's going on, man? You're not telling us something. You're not." He's like, "No, everything's great. Everything's great." And then there's like a talking head of him in the basement whispering, like, "I just won $50, and I don't want those guys to ask me for it." It's just so funny.
Yeah.
Or when he screams, he like all the actors are trying to get the scream right for one of the films, and then Mike just comes in and crushes it. And Mark is so happy. He's so excited.
Yeah, his scream was just incredible. It was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, where's this actor been?
I know.
He's just such a simple person, and I don't mean that in a bad way at all. I think he's a straight shooter, and he's comfortable with where he is at that moment in time. And he does all the music for the movie too, which is also very simple but great. Great music, and all of his interactions with Mark. There's like so many scenes that we could probably sit here and quote, but the other one that comes to mind is where Mark talks about being drunk and calling Morocco. Which is so out of the blue and so random, and you're watching it and you're like, what the hell is he talking about? And he's like, Mike, is that what you want to do with your life? Just get super drunk and call Morocco at 3 a.m. Mike's like, no. And that's it. And that's
on to the next one.
Yeah.
Mike is the best, and I think everyone needs a friend like Mike to get by. He's great, and a lot of love kind of came pouring out when he passed away earlier this year. As I said earlier, a lot of people, I think, realized how great he was as a person, and how well liked he was as well.
Him and Mark, I believe, have done, I mean, from what I looked at just on their IMDb pages, they've done a lot of like cameos and stuff in films, and I'd really like to go seek those out.
Yeah, for sure.
They've even done a Family Guy bit. They just play themselves, I think. Like they become characters in their, or caricatures maybe. But they just play themselves. The Family Guy bit is really funny, and only like a 20-second little clip. But when you think about it, you're like, these two guys in American Movie made in 1999 are in Family Guy. Like that's how far they've gone just from this alone, let alone like what Mark was trying to achieve, what he was trying to film, the short films, the long form Northwestern, which I don't think he's ever actually finished it. I think it's still in production. But the fact that Seth MacFarlane can call them up and say, hi, I want you guys to just be yourself on Family Guy. I think you made it once you made it on Family Guy, right?
Yeah, for sure. I would love to see like a post documentary, just update on where Mark's at in his life, and I'd be curious to see some of like just his family situation, what his parents thought of the success of this movie, and what his children ended up doing, because I feel like you can't help but be influenced by a father with that much passion, and also going to see Apocalypse Now as a child.
One thing I didn't tell you, Lewis, when we were talking about this film before we came on here to record, I've met Mark.
Really?
What?
Really quickly, really briefly. In Los Angeles, they do something called Cinespia, and they'll do screenings at a cemetery. It sounds a little weird, I know. But, there's this very, very famous cemetery just like in the heart of Hollywood, and they do a summer movie screenings outside. It's like a huge thing here. They did American Movie. This is, maybe like 7 or 10 years ago now. And they didn't say that he was going to be there. They just showed the movie. They show it on the big wall of the mausoleum, right? Everybody brings lawn chairs and snacks and whatnot. Very random movie to play, because usually they play like the big budget, like popcorn type stuff, or like classics. Coincidentally, the other movie I've seen at the cemetery was Apocalypse Now, which is a weird a weird coincidence. But they showed the movie, and I remember going with some friends, and their mileage varied on how much they enjoyed the film. But of course, I loved it. And at the end, the host of it was like, "Oh yeah, by the way, we have a surprise for you. Mark is here."
Wow.
It was so just surreal of an experience because you watching this movie, this American movie, is such a surreal watch that when it becomes it becomes real to a certain way.
Yeah.
And he was there, and he was standing right there, and he took a couple of questions, and the TLDR of it is that he's still the same guy. He is passionate about movies. He's pushing along. He's done decently well for himself coming off of something like this, but was a super humble guy, was a super happy guy, like very appreciative of all the success that the movie gave him. It was him stepped out of the screen. He just was a genuinely nice guy. That's
awesome.
That's really cool.
Wow. How cool.
That's awesome.
I'm jealous. There's so many questions that this film left me with. Just how did the filmmakers find Mark?
Yeah.
Like, what was it that kind of made them like zero down and be like, okay, we need to film this?
Listening to the commentary, they didn't say exactly how they met. They I guess bumped into each other somehow, and it started off as just like, oh, we're gonna film the behind the scenes for your movie that you're making, and then I think once they started, it just kept getting more and more interesting that there wasn't any turning back. Yeah. Because like once they met Bill and Mike and everybody, it was just like, we've got to just keep this going. And it was a pretty, from the sound of it, a pretty grueling kind of shoot as far as the documentary goes. I mean, Mark, they don't really talk about it in the documentary, but they do in the commentary. Mark is like has moved in with his parents into their basement, and so he's like living in there while I think one of his brothers is living there. So they kind of talk about that a little bit in the commentary, how there was always kind of a lot of tension surrounding like the kitchen and living room area, just because there was like so much going on all the time, and and the filmmakers that are making the documentary were kind of making it up as they went along. They were buying film as they went along, trying to save up money and buy the next roll of film and stuff. So it is incredible what they were able to accomplish, like knowing what they had to go through to just get this thing made. But, thank God they did and stuck it out for those. I mean, 2 years is a long time to kind of keep going at it, and then they talk about at the end, after Bill passed away, it was kind of like a closing of the film. I mean, they didn't film the funeral, obviously.
No.
But it was like a last, like everybody that was involved in helping out Mark with everything, showed up to the funeral, and they all kind of got to say goodbye to each other, and then after that they started editing it, and it took them another 2 years.
Wow.
So. I wonder where Mark's head was at when he was approached by Chris Smith, and like if Chris came up to him and said, "Hi, I'd like to do this," whether it was a behind the scenes of your film or a documentary of you making it. Like, I wonder if Mark was thinking, "Hey, this would be a great way for me to get my name out there," like thinking of it a little bit Machiavellian to that extent, right? And like, oh, maybe this will help me then fund Northwestern. Or if he was just seeing another filmmaker, because I think this is pretty early on in like what Chris Smith was doing with his films. Like, I know a lot of the documentaries that we were just talking about were relatively recent. So I don't know if this was his first thing or one of his first things, but I wonder if he just saw another Mark in Chris. It was like, oh, here's a guy that's trying to make his movie. Let me help him by having him film me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder, like, off of that, how he felt when it became so popular. When it did win the grand prize, do you think he was like resistant to it, or do you think he was like happy for Chris?
I think
Like,
he
what
must
would
have
be
been
going
happy
through
for him.
his-
I mean,
yeah.
because the commentary takes place after the success of it.
Yeah.
It's after it's been bought and won the grand prize and stuff. So and Mark and Mike and Chris Smith and the other filmmaker, I think her name is Sarah something. I'll look her up real quick. But they're all on the commentary, and everything is. Yeah, I mean they're all. I mean, I'm sure they're all still friends.
Yeah. Well, good. I hope so. Because I can just imagine as, a filmmaker just trying to make the great American movie, and then someone being like, hey, I want to film you doing that, and then get success off the back of it.
Like a hold my beer moment. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Maybe a bit like, I don't know, demoralizing. But I guess I'm looking at it from the wrong way. I guess for Mark, it may have just been like, my name's out there now. Like maybe I can, get things made easier.
Sarah
I do
Price is the
remember-
other filmmaker.
I do remember when he did do this little like Q&A speech is like a strong word for it, but just like addressed the group of people that was watching this cemetery movie. Just a super humble guy. And I can't remember like specifically what he said because we're talking, like I said, like 10 years ago. But I just remember him being exactly how he was, just humble and appreciative and pleasant and supportive. And maybe it was because he did see some personal success just as a person and a character coming out of this film, and like was able to do things like Family Guy and all the other stuff. Or maybe he was just genuinely happy and appreciative of what went down. It's interesting to think that Northwestern still wasn't ever finished, and we're talking like almost 30 years ago. But he seems okay with it. He seems that he's fine with it. He did. I was reading. He did some sort of a documentary himself. I forget what it was called. I don't know if you guys were doing some research about that, but
yeah, I was looking it up earlier. Yeah, I think it was like 5 years ago, and it was accepted to the Slam Dance Film Festival, which is like I don't know if you would call it anti-Sundance Film Festival, but it basically takes place down the street from Sundance.
The Dundee Project.
Yeah.
Focuses on attendees of a UFO festival in Wisconsin. It honestly sounds really entertaining.
Yeah. I mean, and he's done a lot of like cameo work, and he's got like some upcoming projects. It looks like he's got a feature film, I guess, in production, possibly. Called Scare Me. I don't know how accurate that is. Sometimes IMDb is weird, but I mean, I feel like he's got enough of a cult following that. I mean, I would love to see anything that he makes. So
this might be a weird comparison, but who kind of, this is not a one for one in any way, but who kind of comes to mind is Tommy Wiseau a little bit.
Yeah.
As somebody who is just a character, and obviously Mark is maybe not quite as far on the spectrum as Tommy is, but just someone who is an entertaining person and has developed like a cult following, and I think people will watch whatever Tommy Wiseau makes, whether you think it's good or not subjectively. But I feel like Mark is probably in that same boat, is that people want to see what he's doing because of this one project that was done, in the same way that like Tommy had The Room.
Yeah, and I think this film's important because it shows, we talk a lot about filmmakers that have their big break and, make it against all the odds. They were destined to achieve whatever happens. And I think this is like the opposite side of a coin, is like there's people that also have that drive that don't make it in the same way as these other people do. He's not, being offered to direct films for Marvel. He's not, being nominated for Oscars, unfortunately. It's it's the opposite side of what can happen. You'll keep going and you'll still be in the industry, but it's not going to be, not every story is going to be the golden ticket.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely people gauge success, completely in different ways. I would still say that Mark has been hugely successful and did achieve his dreams, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's like for the average person that maybe isn't, you know, a cinephile or something, probably, you know, might think like, oh, you're not making Marvel movies and you haven't really made it or whatever. But you know, that's not true. I think he's probably seen a lot of success.
Being able to just live off his career, just being able to like be in the industry and live off it is a success. You know,
I mean, to inspire, like to be someone who has inspired like Edgar Wright, I think is I mean, that's crazy.
You
know.
I think that says a lot for someone who really hasn't made much of anything.
Exactly.
He's got his short films and he's got his recent documentary project. And for so many like influential directors or actors that were influenced by Mark or Mike, because you talk about, Lewis, all the people that had this like public, you know, just outpouring of support and like, you know, all these different people that were saying he had such an impact on him. I mean, people like Elijah Wood said something about Mike Schank. Like, I love that guy and I learned so much from him. And like, it's wild when you think about that.
Yeah, it is.
I was going to ask, have you guys watched Coven?
I haven't.
Not yet.
I remember I didn't watch it before we did this, but I remember I did watch it a long time ago when I first watched American Movie, and it's interesting. You know, it's a short film. It's like a 30-minute thing. I think you can find it. Don't quote me on this. Maybe on like YouTube or something. I'm sure it's out there. But it's interesting because it's, you know, you watch the film come together. You watch the set pieces of, you know, the people in the woods, of like Mark getting dragged through the mud and the guy's head getting like banged through the thing that we talked about. And then you see it in the movie. I know you see little bits and bobs of it, like I think in the American Movie, they throw in some clips, but to actually like watch it all the way through, it's interesting. I wouldn't say it's like a great film. Sorry, Mark. But it is interesting to watch it.
I'm definitely going to try and seek it out. I think that, you know, I owe it to Mark to watch it after watching him create it, you know. It's like buying the DVD and watching the behind the scenes and then being like, I'm going to put it on the shelf now.
You just did the reverse.
Yeah, exactly,
I do believe it is a feature on the DVD, if you can get a copy of the DVD. That's on
cool. There. I'm hoping with it being on Criterion that we're going to get a Criterion edition of American Movie at some point. That would be
really cool. Yeah, I was thinking that too.
I think that would be great. And that would definitely have some extra features of, you know, where are they now? Or,
for sure.
You know, what happened after. So fingers crossed for that. I really hope that is coming in the near future.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything else that they want to say on American Movie before we move on?
I think the only other thing that we didn't really talk about, and this could be just a brief thing, but I feel like the period of the 90s kind of shines through. And nowadays everybody talks about like, you know, different decades and going back to revisiting different decades, and like watching this movie, you can just feel the 90s like emanate out of it, whether it's the technology or like how like the cars or how people are talking, what they're wearing. Like it's just like from another time. It's like such a relic. But it gave me a little bit of an appreciation for it as a 90s kid. That just added another layer to the onion, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I love just, you know, the closeness of them watching the Super Bowl in the kitchen all together on like a little portable TV, and, you know, all those kind of like little touches that are so far removed from what we've got now, you know.
There another thing that dates it a little bit that I love, because I loved this when I was a kid, is when Mike comes in, he's like, it's a new soda from Coke called Surge. I was like, yeah, Surge, bring it back.
Bill's like, oh, this is pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, I think that brings us to the end of American Movie. This is the part of the show where Brandon and I would normally guess what we each rated it on Letterboxd, but as we have a special guest, we're going to let Andy guess. So, Andy, you are going to guess what me and Brandon each rated this on Letterboxd.
This might be the toughest question of all. Brandon and I don't go too far back, so this will be a real test.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say, let's see. No, having listened to a lot of episodes that preceded this and kind of getting a feel for what you guys like, I'm gonna. Oh god, this is like a lot of pressure. I won't be invited back if I get it wrong.
Yeah.
I would probably, I'll do one at a time. I'd say Brandon, maybe you're at like a 3.5.
Okay.
And then Lewis, I'd put Lewis at a 4.
All right.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brandon. What did you rate it?
I think this is a 5 out of 5 for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
Once I got over my existential crisis and being like seeing myself in every character, I was just able to enjoy it and really be inspired by it. And yeah, it feels, I mean, like I was saying earlier, there's so many universal themes that I think I'm going to be able to keep going back to. That. Like, this is like, usually when I do 5 out of 5, it's something that I want and need to keep watching.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to do that with this film.
Yeah. Yeah, you were close with mine. Mine is 4.5.
Nice.
So a little bit. Yeah. I think
what would be the knock that you'd bring it down to 4.5 instead of 5?
I've got a very me and Brandon talk about it all the time. I've got a very specific like rating, and I think it's because I've never dreamed of being a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. Mine has always been film history, and even though I can appreciate this film, I don't connect with it as like that is me. As Brandon was saying, like this is seeing yourself in those characters and stuff like that. Like I can appreciate the drive, but it's not who I see in the mirror, if that makes sense. Yeah, so that's that is literally the only reason, and it's just a personal thing. It's not anything about the film itself. And who knows, future watchers, when I've seen Coven and go back and watch this again, it might get bumped up just in total. But yeah, that's the only reason it would be half a star less.
Well, I'm glad I was conservative then. I'm really happy that you guys enjoyed it as much as you did.
Yeah.
I got a little nervous when Brandon was saying he was falling asleep in the first couple of viewings.
What would you rate it, Andy? I know that you are on IMDb as opposed to Letterboxd, but what would you give it?
Yeah. I'm an IMDb truther. Which honestly, it's only because that's what I started using as a kid, and it's got like hundreds and hundreds of my ratings in there. So I'm just like, I don't want to port all of this into Letterboxd. This is a 5 out of 5 for me. If it was IMDb, I think I have it on IMDb 9 out of 10, something like that. It's a personal favorite of mine because of the filmmaker experience and like knowing, watching what Mark was doing. I could relate so many of those moments of his like troubled production to films that I was making in college and how you would cobble things together. And I use that term specifically, like literally just like Frankensteining pieces and bits and bobs and making something work. So I see a lot of like my personal experience in it, but I also think that it's just an inherently good movie. It's funny. It's very real and dramatic in a way that I think it's relatable. And it's also not overly complex. Like anybody could sit down and watch it, know exactly what's going on, whether you like the people or you like the subject matter or not, you can follow it. And I think that anybody can take something away. Like Brandon was talking about, there's all these lessons in it, whether it's, the overarching theme of American dream and like wanting to pursue that dream, or something as super, super small as, Mike saying like, don't do drugs or don't drink a lot of alcohol. I just think there's something for everybody in it. And I love it. When I rewatched it, this was probably the first time I rewatched it in maybe about like 5 or 6 years. So there's a decent amount of time that went by, but it's just so refreshing every time I go back. It's always enjoyable for me.
Yeah. And this is, we say this all the time. This is the best thing about Film Church, is that it makes us watch films, that we wouldn't normally pick out. Because I think Brandon and I are from different spectrums. You're the filmmaker and I'm more like the film history guy. So, every other week it's a film that we wouldn't probably normally pick. And this is a film that I wouldn't have got round to watching for a while. So thank you so much for picking it, because it's been an absolute blast. I've loved watching it and talking about it as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you, dude.
Yeah, of course. I did think about picking something that was like more up Lewis's alley, something that was like, golden age, maybe black and white. I was toying with a couple of ideas, and then I was literally
realized he's
scrolling
seen
through
everything.
my Voodoo, and I was like, no, this is just standing out to me. So,
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys really enjoyed it.
Yeah, man.
Good.
It was great.
Yeah. Brandon, do you want me to tell you what we're going to be watching next week?
I do. I need to know.
So this is a film that I actually took inspiration from Andy for when I picked this. It's a film that you had on your list for Halloween that I didn't get a chance to watch. And it's from this year, and it's Pearl.
Oh, nice.
We both watched X. I haven't had a chance to watch Pearl yet. And I think we had a little bit of different opinions on X, maybe. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited. I decided to pick this to see if we would coincide again, or if it would still be a bit opposite. So, next week we're going to be watching Pearl from 2022.
Sweet. I'm excited.
Good.
It's a movie one.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. You can find the show on Twitter and Instagram at Film Church Radio, and you can follow us individually on Letterboxd. Brandon is at Selmanscope, and I'm at WalkerLewis3007 to keep up with what we've been watching. Andy, where can people find you if they want to join your horror-thon next year?
Sure. So you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at AJZike, AJ Zike. I don't know if you can follow someone on IMDb, but feel free to shoot me a note on Instagram. I'm happy to share my ratings. Always down to talk about movies.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Thank you. We also have all our back episodes streaming on all good podcast platforms. Please leave us a rating and review so we know if you like the film, if you didn't, and what you'd pick for us to watch in the future. And all that's left to say is, this is definitely a sign of voodoo.
Why is it a sign of voodoo?
It's an unnatural cross, Brandon.
What, you think when Jesus was hanging there, he thought it was natural, man?
And on that note, amen.
Amen.